So my name is Michael O'Regan, and I spent 6 years at Maersk, and was at Maersk in 2017 when we had the NotPetya cyber event. So happy to take you through some thoughts and some of that history, and maybe have a conversation then. I guess the main reason for supporting conversations like this is that the worst can happen, and the worst did happen in our case, right? So it was a really tough but a kind of profound event across the whole company to change the company. The company that came out was a very different company that the company went in. So as a community of cyber professionals, I think it's good to understand some of the context and some of the learning. So those of you who don't remember NotPetya, this screen still gives me nightmares. This is the screen that on June 26th, I think it was, 2017, at around 10:30, 11 o'clock, started to blink into existence across our entire global organization. It's a pretty earth-shattering experience, really, when you have that. So just some history. So as mentioned, this is written in business speak as well, because we've given this presentation to some business partners as well in public. So that's why it's not terrifically technical, but so bear with that. So I was in Maersk's IT headquarters, which is in Maidenhead, which is a town just outside the UK, outside of London, when NotPetya hit. Remember, I was walking from one floor to another, and I just heard some chatter that there might be a cyber event or a virus. So I went to our command and control center and spoke to my colleague. Our command and control center in Maersk was very impressive. It was kind of a NASA type setup with banks of desks and rows of large screens showing the state of our operations. Everything was managed globally out of Maersk. And one by one, every screen that we saw blinked and the NotPetya message came up. The speed at which that happened and the rate of propagation was astounding. And you can see there some of the numbers, all 50,000 plus of our endpoints and many thousands of applications across. Maersk had a presence in almost every country that you can name. 600 sites were impacted in total, in a total way, in a time that was faster than anybody could respond to that. We tried to turn off our data centers when we still didn't have any information, but we knew something was spreading very quickly. But we couldn't even do that fast enough. So I and initially a member of maybe 3 or 4 IT leaders were on site at that time, and we became the core recovery nucleus, which grew then over the days and weeks. But just a sense of the impact. And Maersk is an old company. It's been around for over 100 years. It's 1 in 5 containers in the world are shipped on a Maersk ship. So it has a huge trade presence, moving food, medicine, goods, and 1,200 applications running that. Were inaccessible. Over 1,000 of those were destroyed. Thousands of servers became inoperable, inaccessible. I remember even picking up my phone to start phoning people to let them know something had happened, phone our CIO. And even the names on our phone had disappeared because they were tied to Active Directory. So all you just had was a list of phone numbers. So, you know, DHCP was gone, Active Directory was gone. So the entire supporting infrastructure and the enabling technologies of IT and business applications disappeared in you know, about an hour. And indeed, anything that was Microsoft servers or desktops, there was complete loss, 100% loss immediately, as good as immediately. So that's a pretty, it's almost like a Hollywood scenario. I've been around IT for quite a while. I've run cyber organizations for quite a while. I've been in operations for quite a while. I'd never seen anything like that in that speed and that level of devastation. So it was, I guess if there's one message I want to get across to people is that those real world Hollywood scenarios do happen, and it did happen. So that's a good message for your business, right? That loss can be total. So I and a small group of people went into a conference room with literally a blank sheet of paper because nothing with technology worked. We shut down all our desktops that maybe one or two hadn't been yet affected, so we just switched off everything. There is no plan for that. There is no document you're going to pull out that says, here's what you do when you've lost everything. And it's then you realize that every resource that you would put your, you know, you would look to your documentation, your license information, your detail, your asset register, your application register, your CMDB, all of those tools that you would reference to start rebuilding part of your infrastructure was also gone. And even our backups, the infrastructure that we would use to restore was gone. So it was a total loss. There's a second bullet here. There is no real way to address this in the public except to be open. We did that pretty quickly. We let our partners know, we let our customers know, we let Wall Street know that we had suffered a major outage, and that we at the start had no windows of how long it would take us to recover. But we just decided that honesty was the best policy there. Now, so this is an interesting story. So we lost, as I said, Active Directory. So when we started talking about the recovery sequence, one of the first things you have to do is bring back your core network and your Active Directory. We didn't back up Active Directory because we had hundreds of domain servers around the globe, and nobody thought that you would ever lose all domain servers at the same time. Unfortunately, we did. So in one of the few strokes of luck that we experienced, it turned out that our one of our domain servers in Nigeria had been offline due to a poor network. When we started reaching out to our business units to say, hey, you know, how are things with you? We found out that that one was actually offline and so unaffected. So we had an individual unplug that server really, really quickly and take out the hard drives. And we put a rather nervous local employee who I think had never left, never been outside of Nigeria. We put him on a plane with his hard drive and an overnight bag and sent him to London, where we duly picked him up at the airport with a hard drive and a copy of the only copy of our Active Directory. So it took a painfully long time then to start restoring Active Directory. I remember we had USB sticks and we had people sitting in a data center with one switch trying to connect, and being very nervous that we would corrupt that copy of Active Directory, because without that we would be really in unknown territory about rebuilding a whole Active Directory forests from nowhere. We were also looking at the virus itself at the time, not petty. We didn't know what it was. Another key lesson for me was for the first 24, 36 hours, we really got no information from Microsoft or our security vendors about what this was, what the payload was. Ostensibly, it was ransomware. It turned out to be, there were no keys available. So even if you wanted to, which we wouldn't have gone down that road, but this variant was bent on destruction. So there was no way to restore things anyway. So then we created a new desktop based on Windows 10. So we upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 10 overnight, basically. Created an image, and then we had the challenge of how do we get this image out to tens of thousands of laptops and servers all over the world. We had people get in a taxi. We had a dozen people get in a dozen taxis, and we drove them to every shop within a 50-kilometer radius to buy every USB stick they could get. And we literally used and drained the entire hinterland of USB sticks. And the idea was we would download and create bootable USBs and send those all over the world. In the end, we didn't have the ability to do that. We couldn't get local technology that was that we could get any kind of meaningful throughput. When you think of downloading a software image as big as Windows 10 to tens of thousands of USB sticks in a non-factory scenario, that didn't just work. So we actually leveraged our network partners to open up their networks and give us huge amount of bandwidth, and local business units could start downloading those images then and creating bootable versions of Windows 10 and Windows Server and start getting those up and running again. Interestingly, Linux itself wasn't affected. We had a lot of servers running on Linux. And while they were inaccessible due to other reasons, they were unaffected. So it took us weeks and weeks, but then we started to gradually restore the Active Directory forest, getting the Windows back up and running, Windows servers starting to one by one get our applications up and running. Another interesting takeaway is when you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications agreeing which ones do you do first, you can start restoring. You can only squeeze so much data through a pipe. Trying to get the business to agree what should go first, what was most important across multiple business lines was that was interesting as well, to try and get a consensus there. So after about 4 weeks, we had most global applications back, and we had rebuilt almost 50,000 desktops. We had, last bullet point there, a real challenge on what we call non-global applications. So those are the applications that are local to a particular business unit that maybe not documented, owned by the business, maybe didn't have a backup. Some of those were never recovered because there was no means to do that, and we never got those back. So as I mentioned, NotPetya was actually a copy of a previous virus. Although the message did offer a restore key for $300, the email that you would send that to, that was not active, so there wasn't even anyone to come back to. Cost, we wrote off between $200 and $300 million over that period. And I think through the cooperation of our customers and their understanding and changing the way we did business over that period of the outage meant that we minimized greater loss, and we had a lot of fantastic cooperation. Even some of our competitors called us and offered us, resources, people or expertise. So it was positive from that perspective. So we hired a lot of people. We brought in a lot of contractors. We brought in some of the big four consultancies to help us in all kinds of ways. Ultimately, I think the leadership was provided locally. The direction was provided locally. Though we needed lots of extra hands to do business continuity and manual booking and manual tracking. After a very short period of time, all our local businesses, were exercising their business continuity plans or responding to the reality that we couldn't give them a timeline as to when IT would be restored. That was a shock to the system. We couldn't say it's going to be a day or 2 days or 2 weeks with any kind of confidence, because we weren't executing towards a plan. We were creating the plans and dealing with challenges as and when they came. So obviously since then, Maersk has made huge investment in cyber capability. And I would contend, when I left about 6 months ago, it's probably the best equipped and highest organization of most cyber maturity in the shipping and logistics industry. It is, and I was privileged to run the security operations function myself, and we now have a huge amount of internal Maersk badged capability. So that was one of the, I guess, upsides. There was no shortage of investment once the event had finished. I guess last few points there. Insurance isn't going to cover you. I know people find it increasingly difficult to get in cyber insurance, but when you have a huge issue like this, there's cold comfort in having cyber insurance. And minimal security, or doing, just having one layer of security or one or two layers. CEOs need to recognize that there is no one magic tool. There's no one magic answer. This is needs to be a layered approach, needs to be an ongoing approach, needs to be a prioritized, risk-based. But it is an ongoing battle that never ends, and being secure requires investment. So that's a key message. So second to last slide here, prevention is unlikely to be an effective strategy. So back in the old days, you would put a lot of faith in your firewalls and your account management. Now you have to assume breach. One of the things we spent a lot of time and energy on after the event was managing our privileged accounts in a far more robust manner. In fact, we set up a dedicated privileged account management function, because once you have a breach, it is the abuse of privileged accounts that allow that to propagate to other networks laterally with great speed. So we put a lot of focus on managing that. IT, I mentioned that the organization that came out of NotPetya was a different one that went into it. So IT was kind of a solution provider before the event. After, it was very much a partner. And IT and the business are very much two in a box now. And we understand that speed to market is great, but you have to do that in a secure way from inception, from the design phase. And that's imperative. It's the only way to stay secure is build secure, run secure. And there's also a lot of kind of unsexy heavy lifting. So my last point there is we also set up this function called maintain and improve. And that's recognizing that you can have a lot of legacy equipment. You know, some organizations believe you sweat the asset and you leave it there for as long as possible, but it can get out of life, it can get out of support. Vendors stop creating security patches. So we spend a great deal of money as well removing and addressing legacy out of the environment. So you know, you can do stuff at perimeter and you can do all of the mitigation, but you have to do down and dirty work as well of maintaining your estate. Last slide here, and just the point I wanted to bring across here is the top of that pyramid. So once we started our remediation program, you know, people understood that, okay, we're spending money on cyber now, and everybody looked to the cyber program to fix all types of cyber issues. But our main focus and our focus for the following 2 or 3 years was preventing extinction level events. And a repeat of an extinction level event, and we never lost that focus and we never deviated. And while, you know, security can and is prevalent in all aspects of IT in the business, there were some things we decided not to do if it didn't go towards that overall goal of preventing extinction level events. So we didn't claim we were going to solve every security issue, but we got our investment, and the terms of reference for the program was to prevent what had happened for NotPetya happening again, and we didn't deviate from that. So if and when you do get investment, pick your battles, prioritize what you need to do, and stick to it, because otherwise your funding can get pulled off into all kinds of directions and maybe not as effective as it may be. So I will pause there for questions, folks. That's kind of a history of what happened. You know, really a really life-changing event. While it was an incredibly difficult 3 months before we kind of got back to business as usual, there was lots of positives from it as well. We had lots of people step up, you know, relatively junior people who kind of really came to the fore and rose to the challenge. It was one time when the company, you know, was completely focused around a single goal, so people felt a lot of camaraderie, and it kind of catapulted Maersk from being an asset company, ships, terminals, etc., to being what it considers itself now, a logistics and data company. So we kind of fast forwarded 3 or 4 years of transition in 3 months. So so there was some positives, though I would not recommend doing this to achieve those positives. So